Good morning. So it's a pleasure to be here. I thank the organizers for the opportunity to present our studies on T-cell responses in long COVID. These studies were done in the frame of the Persicot study at Institut Pasteur and in close collaboration with the team of Dominique Salmon-Serron at Hôpital Hôtel-Dieu in Paris. I have no conflict to declare. We have seen this slide already, so I won't go into the different possible mechanisms, but what I wanted to emphasize is that all of these mechanisms, it's quite striking that they may either imply an insufficient immune response that would enable viral persistence, dysbiosis, and the reactivation of herpes viruses, an inefficient immune response with viral persistence or reactivation, or an excessive immune response that would drive low-grade chronic inflammation and the associated clotting abnormality we just heard about, or neuroinflammation. So there is no consensus. What is clear is that in acute COVID, the timely appearance of adaptive T-cell responses is important. Here, in a classical mild COVID infection, you can see the rise of the viral load, and then the induction of the innate response is the purple curve, followed by the appearance of specific T cells and B cells, which will help drive down not only the virus, but the innate inflammation. Now, if the induction of specific T cells is delayed or absent, then the virus goes on unabated and the inflammation persists too. And importantly, the group of Shane Crotty, Antonio Bertoletti, and Malameni have shown that delayed induction of T cells in the acute stage is associated with severe COVID. Now, in long COVID, it's less clear. There have been several groups pointing to an excessive immune response in long COVID. For instance, Files et al. Have found the persistence of a high frequency of specific CD4 T cells directed to SARS-CoV-2. Cheon et al. Have reported that the presence of resident CD8 T cells in lung tissue is inversely correlated with lung function. But these two studies were mainly done in hospitalized patients. Also, the group of Nina Babel has reported the presence of highly differentiated TEMRA CD8 T cells in long COVID. Recently, the group of Akiko Iwasaki has reported the presence of higher antibody not only to the spike, but also to herpes viruses in long COVID. Also, they found signs of aberrant T-cell engagement, for instance, increased cytokine secretion upon PMA ionomycin stimulation. In addition, the group of Nadia Rohn has reported signs of CD8 T-cell exhaustion, but also the presence of CD4 T cells, specific CD4 T cells, which are poised to migrate into tissues because they express certain chemokine receptors, such as CCR6. And again, they have found increased antibody to the spike in long COVID. On the other hand, at least two groups have reported that low antibodies to the spike early on in the acute stage is associated to a higher risk of long COVID later on. These are the groups of Clara Lehmann in Germany and Mar Masia in Spain. In addition, Hu et al. Have shown that people with low IgG to the spike have an increased risk of showing reactivation of the virus in the following 2 months. the group of Pierre Corbeau has detected CD8 T cells with lower perforin content in the acute stage, and this was associated with a higher risk of long COVID. And last, it has been shown that when the virus breaches the epithelial barrier and goes into the circulation, this is also associated with a higher risk of long COVID. So there is no consensus between signs of excessive or insufficient adaptive immune responses. So we felt this deserved further investigation, and to do so, we launched the PERSICOT study. So it was based on the recruitment of 51 patients at Hôtel Dieu by Dominique Salmon. And these patients had either documented SARS-CoV-2 infection or at least three symptoms of COVID in the acute stage. They were infected for at least 3 months, but actually the median time to onset of symptoms was rather close to 1 year. So these were long-term, long COVID, and they were not hospitalized. They were compared to a group of individuals with resolved COVID who had documented infection and no reinfection, and to a group of healthy donors who had no signs of COVID. And importantly, all these volunteers were sampled before they were vaccinated so that we could study their adaptive responses to the infection and not to the vaccine. It's important to point out that among the 51 long COVID patients studied, 23 were seronegative. They had no antibody to the spike. We chose to study these patients because they represented up to 1/3 of the patients in Dominique Salmon's cohort, and also because they have not frequently been included in physiopathological or clinical studies, because often their infection is not documented. For instance, most of the patients we studied were recruited in 2020 when PCR was not widely available, and they have no antibodies. So they have no laboratory test often to document their infection, and these patients often have trouble to access medical care. But when we look at their spectrum of symptoms, as shown here, the seronegative long COVID patients, or LC- group in orange, their spectrum of symptoms was quite similar to that seen in seropositive long COVID patients, as can be seen here. They even tended to have a few more symptoms. And an interesting difference was that, if I can point here, they tended to have more fever and chills than the seropositive patients. And possibly that could point to viral persistence, induction of interferon, but this remains to be demonstrated. So we chose to study these patients too. And initially, they were defined as seropositive or seronegative based on an ELISA done at the hospital for the spike proteins. But we chose to retest their antibodies with a more sensitive assay called the S-Flow, developed by the team of Olivier Schwartz. This assay consists in incubating HEC293 T cells that express a high level of the spike with the patient sera, and then with a secondary antibody. And then the cells are harvested and analyzed by flow cytometry. So the percentage of IgG positive cells is very well correlated to the amount of spike-specific antibodies. And it's a little more sensitive, and also it reveals the antibodies that bind to the native form of the spike. Using this assay, we could find very few antibodies in the group of healthy donors, a high level of IgG specific to the spike in the group of seropositive long COVID patients, LC+, as high as that found in the group of recovered individuals. And as expected, the responses were low in the group LC- of seronegative long COVID patients, but with this more sensitive assay, we found a few individuals with actually detectable antibodies. And the pattern was the same when we analyzed IgA. Equivalent responses in the LC- plus and RE groups, and a few responses in the LC- group. So what was interesting was that the distribution of IgG was not continuous. We had mostly patients with low response or high responses. So that's why we call them divergent responses. And we asked whether this was the same for antibodies to other proteins of SARS-CoV-2. So we measured by Luminex the antibody responses to the nucleocapsid here and to the matrix and envelope here, and they were correlated to the antibody to the spike in the x-axis. And you see an overall very good correlation between the antibodies to these different viral proteins. So the patients who were seronegative for the spike, they were also seronegative for the nucleocapsid, the matrix, and the envelope. So we really had these divergent responses. We also looked at their antibody responses to common cold coronaviruses, and we found basically no major differences between the patient groups. There was a trend for higher responses to the OC43 spike in the long COVID patients and the recovered patients as compared to the healthy individuals, but we think this may be due to the cross-reactivity of antibodies specific to the SARS-CoV-2 spike, which also bind a little to the OC43 spike. Then we looked at their T-cell responses, and to do so, we used the most sensitive assay we had available, which is to generate primary CD4 T-cell lines. So to do so, we take the PBMC of patients, we stimulate them with mini pools of long peptides, and then we grow these cells for 2 weeks in the presence of IL-2, and at the end of these 2 weeks, we re-stimulate them with individual peptides. And we measured cytokine production by intracellular cytokine staining. You have here TNF-alpha measured in the y-axis and interferon gamma in the x-axis. On the top line, you can see examples without peptide re-stimulation. We see little cytokine production. On the bottom line, you see that the healthy donor on the left does not make much cytokines, neither TNF nor interferon gamma. The long COVID patients in the middle, the seropositive long COVID patients, has a strong cytokine response with double positive cells that make both TNF and gamma. And the seronegative long COVID patients has a low but significant response. And this is interesting because these patients had undocumented infection. So we think by using these sensitive T-cell assays, maybe we could help document their infection. And that may be useful in terms of diagnosis, because often these patients have more difficulty accessing medical care. So these are the results shown for the 3 matrix peptides we studied. You can see one peptide gave few responses, one peptide, and the 2 other matrix peptides were quite immunodominant, with responses in over 90% of seropositive long COVID patients, even though these patients were not selected for a particular Escherichia. And then so you can see that responses were equivalent between the LC plus group and the RE group. Thank you very much. Even with a trend for higher responses in the LC plus groups. And as expected, the responses were low in the HD groups, and they were low also in the LC minus group, with a few individuals that may show some responses. But one has to be careful because there were also a few responses in the HD groups due to cross-reactivity with common cold coronaviruses. Now, if we look at the interferon gamma production, the overall pattern is the same, but this cytokine is interesting because it's cleaner in terms of background in the healthy donor group. So we can say with more confidence that the few responses we detect in the seronegative long COVID patients are actual responses. So we do confirm that we have a few responses in the seronegative long COVID patient groups. And when we sum the responses analyzed for the 9 peptides tested, then we can see that indeed we have equivalent responses in the LC plus and RE groups, and we have detectable response in a subset of the seronegative long COVID patients. So we do confirm these divergent responses in the 2 long COVID groups with either strong or low responses to the viral proteins. If we look at correlations, roughly, I would say we had an overall correlation between antibodies and CD4 responses, as shown by the red color in that rectangle. But if we look into more details, we could see that when we compare the responses to the immunodominant M141 matrix peptide in the x-axis and the antibody to the spike in the y-axis, we had these overall correlations. But if we look at the pink symbols, the seronegative long COVID patients, you see a few patients with T-cell response and no antibodies, and a couple of patients with some antibodies but no T-cell responses. So their responses are less correlated. To look at more in details at this group of seronegative long COVID patients, okay, we could find in the second column, I listed all the patients in yellow that had responses to at least 2 peptides in terms of CD4 responses. The third column is IgG to the spike, and the fourth is IgA to the spike. And you can see that patients who have CD4 responses, they are not necessarily those that have antibodies. Again, this notion of discordant T-cell and antibody responses. But if one considers the 3 criterion together, in this last column, we can see that 52% of the seronegative long COVID patients have signs, immunological signs of a previous SARS-CoV-2 infection. And if we add the criteria of a positive PCR or that of anosmia agesia, which is very indicative of a previous SARS-CoV-2 infection, then we can say that 82% of the seronegative long COVID patients have signs of a previous SARS-CoV-2 infection, and hence that they should be studied. To conclude, we found a similar spectrum of symptoms in seronegative and seropositive long COVID patients. The seropositive long COVID patients show antibody and CD4 responses as high, if not higher, as those of recovered individuals. Seronegative long COVID patients show low antibody and CD4 responses. However, the use of sensitive assays enables to detect immunological signs of a previous infection in half of these patients. And they show a poor coordination of the humoral and the cellular adaptive immune responses to SARS-CoV-2. So we conclude that we have divergent immune responses that define 2 types of long COVID with either strong or low adaptive immune responses to SARS-CoV-2, which may point to at least two distinct etiologies underlying long COVID. I have not much time to speculate about these etiologies, so I will just briefly say that for the seronegative long COVID patients, clearly they have suboptimal adaptive responses, and this may enable possibly viral persistence and localized tissue damage. And also, since this will contribute to maintain an innate response, this would also drive inflammatory damage. For the seropositive long COVID patients, maybe it's just an excessive immune responses that contribute to inflammatory damage, but we cannot rule out that maybe they have a high response that is inefficient. For instance, with low avidity of antibodies or low TCR avidity, and that maybe also they cannot really contain the virus efficiently, and that then we are back to the same scenario as for the seronegative patients. I will stop here by acknowledging the people involved in this work, in particular Jérôme Kervévan, who did all the T-cell assays, postdoctoral fellow in my group, Isabelle Staropoli, in the group of Olivier Schwartz, who did the antibody measurements, of course the clinical team of Dominique Salmon-Serron at Hôtel-Dieu Hospital, Faroudi Boufassa, who is the methodologist of the study, and also our other collaborators in the teams of Hélène Perret, Michael White, Milena Hassan, and I thank all the volunteers who participated to the study. Thank you for your attention.